This is a Cavalry build order in Rise of Kingdoms. This has been a pretty popular request for the channel, as it was recently asked for again by several people. Today we will be covering the order in which you should build each commander for each role in Rise of Kingdoms. Note that since this is such an extensive topic, it is divided by troop type. In this video we're going to be covering Cavalry, and in the next few weeks we'll be covering Infantry and Archers. Without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk garrisons, as it would be wrong for me to cover anything else first given the typical content of this channel. In the early game though, there isn't a lot to be talking about for Cavalry garrisons. Before Season 1 and even in Season 1, there isn't really any definitive Cavalry specific commanders that are garrison viable, as typically Sun Tzu is the top dog before more commanders start releasing. Once you get to Season 2, however, a very popular choice is running Saladin and YSG. While it isn't a specifically cavalry-only option, it does include Saladin, who's an interesting commander. This pair is pretty tough to take on because Saladin helps YSG take much less damage from his third skill, since he reduces skill damage taken and counterattack damage taken. But it isn't necessarily something I recommend building heavily anymore, unless you are willing to put yourself behind on some Season of Conquest commander pairs for garrison. Or if you're planning on using Saladin in the field later on, for a second or third march pair. Once you reach Season of Conquest, you have a ton of open options. However, first you should be building Eleanor. She's the flagship commander of the Cavalry meta, and should be treated as such. If you did build Saladin in Season 2, you could then temporarily use him with Eleanor, but know that you won't trade optimally with this pair, and it's just a stopgap until you can get a traditional pair to use. Once you've fully maxed Eleanor, you can go to Hera for a mixed defense, or Jan for full cavalry. Of the two, I recommend Hera first, but both are pretty solid options. If you do go with Jan, you'll want him primary over Eleanor, due to better talents. After you get your secondary commander done, you should build the one you skipped. So if you built Hera, you build Jan. If you built Jan, you build Hera. After that, you have some options. Those three commanders constitute a majority of the meta, so you can either start saving heads for the next generation of commanders, or branch out to build more cavalry defenses. For the latter, you would want to build either Lapu Lapu or Nevsky. Lapu Lapu will give you two mixed defenses with Eleanor Hera or Jan Lapu Lapu, or vice versa when you switch Lapu Lapu and Hera. While Nevsky gives you an all cavalry defense in Jan Nevsky, which is pretty strong, but needs 100% cavalry to truly work, as Nevsky's skill increasing skill damage is dependent on being fully cavalry. Of the groups, I lean towards mixed defenses because they're easier to reinforce, especially in the case that you're building two defenses, meaning you're going to be defending two fronts. So if I were starting over, I would go for Lapu Lapu here, but either has merit, as Nevsky is also a great value pick that can be used in the field, especially if you built Saladin as well. That gives you a field pair if you're not necessarily building two garrisons at the same time. Next, we're on to the rally build order. In the early game, you really just have what's available. Minamoto is a popular option in the early game, but there just really isn't anything super necessary for the late game to get a head start on. In Season 2, Saladin is a great option and is a popular choice. Good damage and resistances, and at 5551, he'll still be rally viable for everything except for against cities, since the last skill is city attacking specific. He's also the top city rally early on when it comes to cavalry, due to the fact that that skill, if you do decide to max it, just know that you won't get any resources from the cities if you do. In that case, Khan is a popular option with them early on, but that is not a pair for everyone, as it does not translate well in the later game at all, so it'd be something that you would want to build with the understanding that it will not be a viable option for you later on, and those will just sit there and gather dust. Lastly, once we get to Season of Conquest, you have a little less flexible than some of these other options, since there's only one really major pair in the rally meta that is true top tier. So in this case, you'll want to build either Justinian or Nevsky first. If you build Saladin, you can go Saladin with Justinian or Nevsky as a bridge pair, like we talked about with Saladin and Eleanor in the last section. But like I mentioned, it would be purely a bridge pairing and wouldn't be something I recommend long term, just when it is desperately needed and with the understanding that it won't be terribly efficient versus actual meta pairings. Once you get the first commander built, you'll want to build the other, as Justinian Nevsky is the big hitter in the rally meta. This will give you a strong option to hit most defenses. Although it doesn't have ideal trades against Gorgo, that is part of the downside of cavalry being countered by infantry. Once you have Justinian Nevsky, you can either save heads for the next cycle or go for Attila Takeda. Attila Takeda is still a solid option, but is more dependent on being swarmed to even out the trade, and is a pretty popular choice in that regard. It is a terrific option to counter enemy field presences, as if they swarm it, it should help fight off enemies a little more effectively than Justinian Nevsky will, while also dealing a lot of normal damage. That being said, Attila Takeda is totally optional as far as rallies go, and Justinian Nevsky should be your first focus due to how standard and powerful it is with that double defense buff on their primary skills. Last but certainly not least, we are onto the field. This is by far the most broad of the options in the end, but the start is fairly closed off. The early game commanders unfortunately just do not translate well into the later game. In the early game, Minamoto is a popular choice for spenders, while free-to-play are best off sticking to epic commanders. Belisarius is a popular option that I like, and Bybers is another good option, as are most of the other epic cavalry commanders, save maybe Pelagius. Cavalry is fortunate in that regard to have a stacked epic commander roster pretty early on. Once you reach your first few seasons of KvK, you can build Saladin, as he's a great option at 5551 for the field, since his force skill does nothing for your field viability. Saladin can go well with basically any epic cavalry commander, but I don't recommend Khan for field players, as the Season of Conquest meta is just way too packed and he's way too weak for the field in that regard. Once you reach the Season of Conquest, there is one commander you should be maxing first, and that's Nevsky. Nevsky is top notch, and still the top dog in the field meta. Skill tree, good burst, and if you build Saladin, he goes great with Saladin as well. If you didn't build him, Nevsky is still great with all the epics as well once you start building a second pair. Once Nevsky is maxed, you can go for Joan Prime or William. Of the two, I recommend Joan Prime, as you can tell by the corner of my screen, but either works. Once you have that second commander built and selected, you'll want to go for Huo. Huo is like another Nevsky, so you have a solid base for another pair that can also go with Saladin temporarily, or epic commanders until you get your fourth legendary. Lastly, you'll want to build whatever you didn't out of Joan Prime and William, as the four of those commanders can basically make any pairing that's viable. After that, you can either save some gold heads for future generations, which I recommend since the field meta shifts as fast as it does, or start investing into other pairs. Like rallies, Attila Takeda is a popular side option for field, but is completely optional and situational based on your needs. Attila Takeda does do a great job tanking enemy field presences, so it does a good job of helping keep your other marches alive. But like I said, it's not totally necessary if you don't want to go in that direction. Otherwise, Belisarius Prime, Zhang Yu, and if you build Saladin are all great options for a third pair that you can use in any combination. Or if you're completely set on building another pair but not committed to cavalry specifically, I would recommend looking into archer or infantry pairings. But with that, we will wrap up our discussion on cavalry build orders in Rise of Kingdoms. This is, of course, subject to change as more commanders are released and the meta shifts. But it should serve as a great footing to get you started and moving in the right direction for your role, depending on where you are right now in the game. But let me know down in the comments, is there a commander you think should be built in the order? If you want me to cover another topic, you can also do that in the comments, or join the Discord using the link in the description. And as always, good luck, fight well, and I will see you on the battlefield.